Welcome to our deep dive into water purification in the wild. We've got a whole stack of sources here.
Oh, wow.
All about finding clean drinking water
Yeah.
when you're miles from civilization.
It's amazing
Yeah.
what people have figured out over the years
Right.
just to stay hydrated.
It is. And,
Isn't it?
I think a lot of us
Yeah.
take clean water for granted.
Oh, totally.
We just turn on the tap
Uh-huh.
and there it is.
Yeah.
But out in the wilderness,
Yeah.
it's a whole different story.
It is a whole different story.
Yeah.
It becomes this
Yeah.
essential resource that you
You
have
have to really work for.
work for. Yeah.
And it can be the difference between a
Yeah.
successful trip
Uh-huh.
and a dangerous situation.
Totally.
So let's get right to it.
Okay.
Why is purifying water in the wild so important?
Right.
I mean, if a stream looks clear,
Hmm.
is it really that risky to take a sip?
Well, you might be surprised.
That's-
Imagine you're on a multi-day hike and you find this crystal clear stream.
Mm-hmm.
You might be tempted to just refill your bottle.
Yeah.
But what you don't see are microscopic bacteria
Oh, gosh.
that can cause a range of problems, from an upset stomach
Okay.
to serious dehydration.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about
Oh.
little inconvenience here.
No.
These are things that can really derail your adventure.
Absolutely.
Or worse.
And those tiny threats aren't the only things
Oh, really?
lurking in seemingly pristine water.
Wow.
We're talking about bacteria like E. coli, viruses,
Uh-huh.
parasites like Giardia.
Right.
These things can lead to pretty nasty illnesses.
Okay.
Gastroenteritis, dysentery,
Okay.
even life-threatening conditions.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Not exactly the kind of souvenir
Right.
you want from a wilderness trip.
Nope.
One of the sources mentioned chemicals and heavy metals, too.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't think those would be an issue.
Mm.
Way out in the wilderness, you'd be surprised.
Oh, really?
Think about things like agricultural runoff,
Mhm.
mining operations,
Mhm.
even pollution from faraway cities.
Wow.
All of that
Okay.
can make its way into seemingly remote water sources.
So the takeaway here is purify first,
Hmm.
drink later,
Yes.
no matter how thirsty you are.
Right.
I think it's easy to assume that those risks
Yeah.
only apply to stagnant water
Mm.
or obviously polluted areas.
Right.
But these sources are making it clear that purification is non-negotiable,
It is.
no matter how clean a source might look.
You can't just trust your eyes.
Right.
Couldn't agree more.
Even that pristine mountain spring
Yeah.
could be harboring something you don't want to mess with.
Right.
Okay, so we're officially convinced that we need to purify. Now, how do we actually find water?
Yeah.
In the first place?
Yeah.
Is it really as simple as stumbling upon a river or a lake?
Sometimes it is,
Okay.
but these sources go beyond that.
Okay.
It's about observation.
A little science,
Yeah.
and maybe even channeling your inner detective.
Oh.
You might be surprised to learn that you can find drinkable water
Yeah.
even in a seemingly dry desert if you know where to look.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you've got me intrigued. What are some of the things we should be looking for?
Well, for example,
Okay.
have you ever noticed how animals
Hmm.
seem to always know where to find water?
That's true.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen documentaries
Mhm.
where animals congregate around watering holes.
Exactly.
Right.
Converging animal tracks,
Yeah.
especially in dry areas, can often lead you to water.
Okay.
They have a natural instinct for finding it.
Right.
So following their lead
Makes sense.
can be a real lifesaver.
It's like they're already doing the hard work for us.
Right.
Yeah.
And beyond animal behavior,
Okay.
you can use topographical features to your advantage.
Uh-huh.
Think about valleys, ditches,
Okay.
those low-lying areas.
Yeah.
Those are all natural collection points for water.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Water flows downhill.
Exactly.
Right.
And don't forget about the clues that plants can provide.
Hmm.
Denser, darker vegetation
Yeah.
usually indicates moisture.
Okay.
Certain trees, like willows and cottonwoods,
Oh, wow.
are actually known to thrive near water sources.
So it's really about paying attention to your surroundings
It is,
and
yeah.
thinking like water.
Mhm.
What would water do?
Yep.
Where would it go?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Even things like damp ground,
Okay.
vibrant plant life, or early morning fog
Oh, wow.
can be hints that water is nearby.
Okay, let's say we followed the clues
Okay.
and found a potential water source.
All right.
Now comes the purification part.
Yeah.
These sources outline a bunch of different techniques,
Uh-huh.
from the super basic
Yep.
to some pretty high-tech options.
Right.
Let's start with the classic.
Okay.
Boiling.
The classic.
It's been the go-to method for centuries.
Yep.
And it's still one of the most effective ways to kill most harmful microorganisms.
It is.
One source told this great story
Oh, yeah.
about a group of teenagers who used to go on camping trips with minimal gear.
Okay.
They'd rely on boiling
Right.
to make any water they found safe to drink, no matter what they got up to that day.
Oh, wow.
It's a good reminder that you don't always need fancy gadgets to survive.
Resourcefulness is key.
Right.
But even with something as simple as boiling,
Okay.
there are some things to keep in mind.
Right.
At sea level,
Okay.
you'd boil water for 1 minute to purify it,
Okay.
but as you gain altitude,
Yeah.
the boiling point of water actually drops.
Oh, wow.
So for every 1,000 feet you go up,
Okay.
you need to add an extra minute of boiling time.
Oh, wow. That's something I definitely wouldn't have known.
Important.
It's those little details
Yeah.
that can make a big difference out there.
Exactly.
Being informed is key,
Yes.
but boiling isn't the only option.
Right.
Another common method is filtration.
Oh, yeah. Filtration.
There are tons of options here.
So many.
Pump action filters,
Yep.
gravity-fed systems,
Uh-huh.
even those straw filters you can use on the go.
I've seen those.
I've seen those straw filters.
Yeah.
They seem super convenient,
They are.
especially if you're backpacking or hiking long distances.
Mm-hmm.
What are the pros and cons of the different types?
Well, pump filters like the Katadyn Hiker Pro
Okay.
are really good for quickly filtering out sediment,
Okay.
but they can be a bit bulky.
Right.
Gravity filters, on the other hand,
Okay.
are great for larger groups,
Uh-huh.
but require a bit more setup.
Okay. And what about those straw filters?
Straw filters are perfect for solo hikers,
Okay.
or if you're just looking for a quick sip,
Right.
but they might not be the best choice for really murky water.
So it really comes down to choosing the right tool for the job, right?
Right, it does.
You have to consider your group size.
Yeah.
How long you'll be out there,
Uh-huh.
what the water conditions are like.
Yeah. And then we have chemical treatments.
Okay.
Iodine and chlorine dioxide tablets are popular.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're lightweight and easy to use.
Right.
But they don't remove sediment.
Okay.
And there can be some taste issues.
Right.
Plus, iodine isn't recommended for pregnant women or people with thyroid problems.
It's important to know.
It is.
I wouldn't want to rely on a method that could actually be harmful.
Right.
Right.
That's why understanding the pros and cons of each method is crucial.
Absolutely.
And of course, always check those warning labels.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. On to something a little more high-tech.
Okay.
UV purification.
All right.
I'm curious about this one.
Yeah.
How effective is it compared to boiling or filtration?
UV light is actually really effective at neutralizing pathogens.
Oh, wow.
It works by damaging their DNA, essentially making them harmless.
Okay.
You can use UV pens for this,
Okay.
or even harness the power of sunlight
Oh, wow.
with a technique called SODIS, which stands for solar water disinfection.
Wait, so you can actually purify water just by leaving it in the sun?
You can.
Oh, wow.
It might not be as fast as boiling or using a filter,
Right.
but it's surprisingly effective.
Okay.
All you need is a clear plastic bottle
Okay.
and some good old-fashioned sunshine.
Okay, this is where it gets really cool.
Right.
Distillation.
Ooh, distillation.
It's like mimicking nature's rain cycle
Yeah.
to separate pure water from any contaminants.
What I find fascinating about distillation
Yeah.
is that it can be used to purify water from
Really?
almost any source.
Really?
Even seawater or a puddle.
I read about that.
Yeah.
You can actually build a solar still using some pretty basic materials.
Yeah.
Basically, you dig a pit in the ground,
Mm-hmm.
cover it with plastic sheeting,
Yep.
and let the sun do the work.
Let the sun do the work.
The heat evaporates the water,
Right.
which then condenses on the plastic
Uh-huh.
and drips into a container.
It's a slow process, maybe yielding half a liter to a liter a day.
Wow.
But it's a testament to human ingenuity,
Right.
turning even the most unlikely sources into drinkable water.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to ask about this one.
Okay.
Because it sounds almost too good to be true.
Right.
Sourcing water from plants.
Oh, yeah.
Is that actually possible?
It is.
Oh, cow.
Plants naturally release moisture
Okay.
through a process called transpiration.
Okay.
You can capture this moisture
Uh-huh.
using a plastic bag and some leafy branches.
Really?
There are also ways to extract moisture from fruits and cacti like prickly pear.
So even in a seemingly barren environment,
Yeah.
there might be hidden sources of water
Right.
just waiting to be tapped.
Hmm.
That's incredible.
But I have to stress the importance of being absolutely certain
Right.
about plant identification here.
Okay.
Some plants can be poisonous,
Yeah.
so don't go experimenting without the proper knowledge.
Safety first.
Yes.
And speaking of extreme situations, some of the sources even mention turning salt water drinkable.
Oh, yeah.
Is that really possible?
It is, but it requires specific solar stills designed for that purpose.
Okay.
It's not easy.
Right.
And it takes a lot of patience. But it is possible to get small amounts of fresh water from seawater using this method.
So to sum it up, water purification in the wild is a whole skill set in itself.
It is.
It's about understanding the risks, knowing your options,
Yeah.
and being observant.
Right.
We've covered finding water and all sorts of purification methods.
Right.
What about storing and conserving the precious water we've worked so hard to get?
Yeah, that's important.
That seems just as important,
It is.
especially if you're in a survival situation.
Absolutely.
Let's talk all about storage and conservation after a quick break.
You're absolutely right. Conserving and storing water is just as important as finding and purifying it, especially if you're in a survival situation or on a multi-day trip where every drop counts.
Okay, so let's dive into that. What are some of the key things we need to know about storing water in the wild?
One thing that really stood out to me in these sources was the emphasis on using the right containers. It's not just about grabbing any old bottle or jug you might find.
I can see how that would be important. Are there certain materials that we should avoid?
Definitely. Some materials can actually leach chemicals into your water,
Oh, wow.
which would defeat the whole purpose of purifying it in the first place.
Right.
If you're using manufactured containers,
Yeah,
make sure they're specifically designed for water storage.
that makes sense.
Hmm.
What about natural containers? I've heard of people using things like hollowed out logs or bamboo stalks.
Those can work in a pinch, but they require very thorough cleaning
Right.
before you store any purified water in them.
Yeah, you don't want to introduce any new contaminants
Right.
after all that work you did to purify it.
Exactly.
Good point. So container material is important.
Uh-huh.
What about where we store our water?
Okay.
Does that matter?
It matters a lot.
Okay.
Sunlight and warmth can actually promote the growth of algae and bacteria.
Oh, gosh.
So storing your water in a cool, shaded place is super important.
So even after we've purified the water, we still need to be thinking about keeping it clean and safe.
Exactly. It's an
So-
ongoing process. One tip I saw was to bury your container partially in the ground
Okay.
or cover it with leaves or branches to help keep it cool.
That's a great idea. It's like using nature's insulation to your advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just as important as keeping it cool is keeping it away from anything that could contaminate it.
Okay.
Think latrines, garbage dumps, animal trails.
Right.
Basically, common sense hygiene applies even in the wilderness.
Right. Probably goes without saying.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't want to store your water near anything
Nope.
that could reintroduce those harmful things we just worked so hard to remove.
Exactly.
Right.
And don't forget to keep your containers covered to prevent anything from falling in. A cloth or a flat stone can do the trick.
Okay. What if our water has been sitting in a container for a while? Do we need to re-purify it
That's a good question.
just to be safe?
And a smart precaution. It never hurts to be extra cautious.
Right.
Boiling it again,
Okay.
using another chemical treatment,
Right.
or filtering it
Yeah.
can help ensure that it's still safe to drink even after storage.
So we've talked about finding water, purifying it,
Hmm.
and storing it safely.
Right,
But these sources also emphasize the importance of water conservation, right?
right. Finding and purifying water can take a lot of time and energy.
Right.
So making what you have last as long as possible is crucial.
What are some of the best ways to conserve water when you're in the wilderness?
The sources offered some practical tips.
Okay.
Things like using water sparingly when washing dishes or for personal hygiene.
Right.
Every little bit counts.
I remember reading about using gray water,
Oh, yeah.
the water left over from washing dishes or yourself,
Mhm.
for things like watering plants if
Yeah.
you're in a longer-term survival situation.
That's a great example of resourcefulness.
Right.
It's all about making every drop count.
What about things like the gear we choose? Could that help us conserve water?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Choosing lightweight, quick-drying clothing and gear
Okay.
can help minimize the amount of water you need for washing.
Right.
And planning meals that require minimal water for cooking can make a big difference too.
Those are great tips. It sounds like conservation really comes down to being mindful and thinking ahead.
It does.
Planning meals in advance, choosing the right gear.
Uh-huh.
It's about making conscious decisions
Right.
that minimize our water usage.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about why water purification is so important in the wild, how to find potential water sources,
Yeah.
all sorts of different purification methods, and now how to safely store and conserve our water.
Wow. It's really amazing how much there is to know about something as seemingly simple as water.
It is.
Right.
And I think it speaks to how essential water is to our survival.
Right.
It's something we often take for granted in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
But when you're out in the wilderness, it takes on a whole new level of importance.
It becomes this precious resource you have to really work for and protect.
It does.
So for anyone listening who might be thinking, this is all great information,
Yeah,
but I'm not planning on being stranded in the wilderness anytime soon.
right.
Why should they care about all this?
That's a great question. I think it boils down to preparedness and self-reliance.
Okay.
Whether you're an experienced hiker or just starting out,
Yeah.
knowing how to find, purify, and conserve water in the wild could be essential in an emergency situation.
It's about having the knowledge and skills to take care of yourself and the people you're with. When you step off the grid,
Yeah.
even if it's just for a day hike.
Exactly. It's about empowering yourself to explore the wild with confidence,
Right.
knowing that you can handle one of the most basic yet crucial elements of survival.
But this deep dive has revealed so much more than just practical survival tips, hasn't it?
It has.
Right.
What's truly fascinating is how these methods for finding and purifying water
Yeah.
reflect our connection to nature and the incredible ingenuity humans have developed over centuries
Right.
to survive in challenging environments.
It's incredible, isn't it? It makes you appreciate the resourcefulness of our ancestors.
It does.
And the fact that even today,
Yeah.
with all our technology, these basic skills are still so relevant and valuable.
Absolutely. And it raises some interesting questions for all of us to consider.
Okay.
If you were faced with a survival situation,
Yeah.
what steps would you take to find and purify water?
Right?
Could you build a solar still? Would you feel confident identifying safe and edible plants
Right.
to supplement your water supply?
It's definitely something to think about. Preparedness is key.
It is.
And even having a basic understanding of these concepts can put you a step ahead.
Right. It's about cultivating that awareness and that connection to the natural world.
You know, one thing that wasn't explicitly mentioned in any of the sources,
Okay.
but that I kept coming back to throughout this whole deep dive,
Yeah, what's that?
it's the idea of water as a shared resource.
Oh, yeah.
We often think of water in terms of our individual needs,
Right.
a glass of water, a shower, watering our plants.
Yeah.
But when you're out in the wild,
Yeah.
it really hits home that water is something that connects us all,
It does.
that sustains all life.
That's such an important point.
Right.
It reminds us that we have a responsibility to use water wisely, not just for our own survival,
Right.
but to protect it for future generations
Yes,
and for all the ecosystems that depend on it.
exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into water purification in the wild,
Okay.
here's something I'd like to leave you with.
As we develop more and more sophisticated technologies for water purification, do you think we're losing touch with those ancestral skills and that deeper understanding of water's importance?
That's a really thought-provoking question.
Right.
And it's definitely something I'll be pondering on my next adventure.
Me too. And to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
stay curious, stay hydrated, and happy adventuring.
Good advice.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It is.
On one hand, we have all these incredible technologies
Yeah.
that make water purification easier and more efficient than ever before.
Right.
But on the other hand,
Yeah.
there's something to be said for those time-tested, low-tech methods
Yeah,
that connect us to our ancestors and to the natural world.
absolutely. And I think it highlights the importance of not becoming too reliant on technology.
Right.
What happens if your filter breaks?
Oh, yeah.
Or your UV pen runs out of batteries
oh, big.
deep in the backcountry?
Yeah, that would be bad.
Having that foundational knowledge
Yeah.
of those more basic techniques
Right.
could be a real lifesaver.
It's like having a backup plan
It is.
for your backup plan.
Exactly.
And beyond the practical survival aspects, there's a certain satisfaction that comes from
Yeah.
being able to provide for yourself
Right.
using those more primitive methods.
Totally.
It's empowering in a way.
Empowering and rewarding.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes you appreciate those resources even more, I think.
Speaking of appreciating resources,
Yeah.
we touched on the idea of sustainability earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that one source that mentioned how even the angle of your solar still can affect its efficiency?
Oh, wow.
They found that a 30-degree angle captured the most water.
That's amazing.
It's fascinating how these little details
It is.
can make such a big difference.
It shows that there's a real science to all of this.
There is.
It's not just about stumbling around in the woods and hoping for the best.
Right.
There's a level of knowledge and skill involved,
Mhm.
and that's what makes it so interesting.
It's like a puzzle you have to solve
Oh, yeah,
using your knowledge of the environment and these time-tested techniques.
exactly. And it's not just about the technical aspects either.
Right.
We also talked about the ethical considerations
Yeah.
of water in the wild,
Mm-hmm.
being mindful of local water sources and regulations, especially in areas where water resources might be limited.
That's a crucial point.
Right.
It's about recognizing that water isn't just something we take from the environment.
Yeah.
It's something we're a part of.
Right.
Something we need to manage responsibly.
It's like being a guest in someone's home.
It is.
You want to be respectful.
Yeah.
Clean up after yourself.
Right.
And not take more than your fair share.
I like that analogy.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected
Yeah.
and our actions have consequences,
Absolutely.
even when we're out in the wilderness.
Well said.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to learn more about water purification or wilderness survival in general,
Right.
where should they go from here? What are some good resources?
Fuck, so many.
Or next steps?
Oh, there's a wealth of information out there.
Yeah.
There are some fantastic survival guides and websites and even courses and workshops
Oh, wow.
where you can learn hands-on skills
Yeah.
from experienced instructors.
I've always wanted to try building a solar still myself.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like a fun and practical project.
It is.
Yeah.
And, even if you never find yourself in a real survival situation, having these skills can be incredibly empowering.
Right.
They give you a deeper connection to the natural world
Absolutely.
and a greater appreciation for the things we often take for granted.
Like a cool, refreshing glass of clean water.
Exactly.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into water purification in the wild.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been enlightening.
It has.
And to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
stay curious, stay hydrated,
Good advice.
and happy adventuring.